Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Power Rangers episodes. So, we have, of course, 3 different seasons with one similarity, which is in every single one of them, there are evil Power Rangers in these episodes. So, we have, for Power Rangers Time Force, we are covering episode 18, Trust and Triumph. For Power Rangers SPD, it's been a while, but we're now covering SPD for an episode. And that episode, of course, would be episode 17, Recognition. And then we are also covering Power Rangers Mystic Force, episode 28, Light Source. So, we come to find in Trust and Triumph, the Time Force episode, we are to have Nadira that is to come up with a monster called TurtleCon. And TurtleCon, it seems his speciality is to put the Rangers into a pocket dimension. And that dimension just so happens to be where the Rangers go on and eat and meet with their evil equals. And so we have the evil and the good Rangers fighting against one another and realize that they are a perfect match. And so the Rangers have to desperately come up with some way to try to escape this dimension, and that leads some of our characters escaping and some of our characters not. So really, I thought that this was a great episode. I really did like it. I really did enjoy it. Definitely would tell people to check it out, especially if you are Time Force fans or if you're just Power Rangers fans, because I think it's just a good enough episode. And so with that said, let's talk about the Power Rangers SPD episode called Recognition. So this episode is to, of course, be focused on Sky. Sky, it seems, is to be trying to fiddle on this computer, and Rick is desperately, the robot dog, wanting to play fetch with Sky. And that ends up coming into a whole factor into this episode, bizarrely. So we have a villain called Wootox that is to go up against the Rangers, and come to find out, Wootox has a special ability to be able to body swap with anybody. So, as Wootox is to quickly get taken down, we then realize that Wootox is not going to be completely taken out, as he body swaps with Sky, and Sky is to go on and try to figure out where exactly the cockpit of the Delta Base headquarters is, to get into the Megazord, which of course is to be the Delta Commander Megazord. My bad for that little pause here. I had to just kind of take the time and kind of word this perfectly. So with that said, then we are to get, of course, to the Power Rangers Mystic Force episode, where it seems that we're coming into the later part of this season, and also it seems that we come to this episode as it being a story arcing like thing, because we have gone on to see that this episode was to have like a big long like stretch of telling you what has happened through the show, and is to also leave on a to be continued kind of thing, because it's like a two-parter. So we come to find that we have these characters called the Terrors, and they seem to be 10 of them. And so at the beginning of this, there's a whole selection process of who is going to get to be against the Rangers this time around, and it seems that it ends up being Hecatoid. And Hecatoid, it seems, is to be this kind of frog-like monster, and so it seems that Hecatoid is to consistently be timing the Rangers and having them forcibly battle all of these threats, and come to find out, one of their final threats seem to be themselves. So we are also to find out that Hecatoid had captured Udana, who is to be somewhat of another Mystic Force Power Ranger, which we won't actually see her become a Power Ranger in this episode. We'll just see her be Udana, just kind of stuck in this this caged egg-like thing. And so, like, she's almost to kind of be like the Zordon character or the Demetria character, but then they ended up kind of rolling her into being an actual Ranger, which I was like, okay, that's really fascinating. Plus, we get a little bit of showcasing of the interesting Ranger called Solar, or no wait, Solaris Knight. And so I was just kind of like, okay, like I've kind of wanted to see this guy in action, and because he looks interesting, he has an interesting kind of helmet and stuff like that. And it seems that we are also to like find that Korik is to see a little bit of story here. The Purple Ranger that, of course, I had gone on to see earlier, that was to fight the Rangers, and it might seem that Korik might be joining the side of good at some point. So, with that said, I thought that these episodes were great fun. I don't know if I could call them all great, but pretty dang close. So, with that said, I would recommend every single one of these seasons for people who are Power Rangers fans. Because every time I go on, and like even Mystic Force, like I know a lot of people might not easily be won over by Mystic Force, but every time I've gone on and seen an episode of Mystic Force, I am not left as tired or exhausted as I would go on to see certain other seasons or Power Rangers shows of sort, like RPM or anything that is a Disney kind of season, which eventually just I'm like, man, like this story is just whoo. So hopefully I'm going to be able to give you all the spoilers for these episodes, as I'm kind of very late in the game in the day. So anyways, I think it's about that time to just double five this bad boy up, because I think it's about that time yet again to, of course, go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil these episodes. So, letting you know right now, I'm just going to tell you which season and so on and so forth that, of course, I am getting into, because I had already stated the number of the episodes and the titles. So, if really you have quickly forgotten what name, number, or title, or whichever of these episodes are, just scroll back to the beginning of this episode. So, unless I can just state them now. Trust and Triumph is to be the Time Force episode. So, with that said, let's go into the very beginning of this. So, we have Nadira with the Cyclobots, and they are stealing money from the Silver Hills Bank. Really, I was to go on and be like, okay, I really need to know, like, this bank, because it says the word hills, it says bank, but what's the other word? Because I saw it, like, kind of flippingly backwards, and I was like, did it say silver? And then when I would look at the actual door, it said Silver Hills Bank. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I can actually state a location. So, we have the Cyclobots and Nadira who grab him money, and they're like, yeah, like, big bills, this is great. So, we come to find our Time Force Rangers who are to have the Voltex bazookas out, all of them. And so we have Jen who is laying out the plan that they're going to go in and try to bring Nadira and the Cyclobots out for West to arrest them. One ranger is going to arrest a whole bunch of people. That sounds like a great idea. So we are to have the Rangers go into the bank and sucker Nadira and the Cyclobots out of the bank. And by the time that Wes is to be able to arrest anybody, Nadira and the Cyclobots vanish because Wes, of course, is very distracted by the Silver Guardians who had come in. And Wes was telling Eric, it's like, well, hey, like, we got this, Eric. You don't need to be here. And Eric's just like, whatever. And so by the time Wes was distracted with Eric, Wes then has to run to the front of this bank. By that time, we then have Nadira, and we, of course, have the Cyclobots that disappear. We have Jen, who is just so angry and frustrated with Wes, as per usual, because it always seems that Jen and Wes have this kind of tension between one another. Maybe it's love and tension, maybe it's just that they don't like one another, but it is what it is. So we go on to have Wes and Jen, who go back to the clock tower to argue amongst themselves. To then, of course, have Wes tell Jen, it's like, well, hey, I was distracted by the Silver Guardians. And Jen was like, well, I knew that the Silver Guardians were going to be there. So I was to adjust our plan. It's like, well, how exactly did you adjust the plan? And so Wes goes on to tell Jen that it seems that the rest of the Rangers, as well as Wes, doesn't trust Jen. It seems that Wes is a state that Jen does have feelings for him, but, like, how can he go on and fall for Jen when he is too busy falling for her mistrust? I had to word that weirdly. So we then turn around and we, of course, are to go to the cryo prison with Rancic, Nadira, and we come to find out that Nadira is to be in this pocket dimension where it seems that she's sipping mojibas at some kind of beach resort. Then making her way back to talk to TurtleCon and hoping that TurtleCon is going to have an idea of what pocket dimension would be best fitted for the Time Force Rangers. So we go on to have Circuit, who is to state that there is mutants at an industrial center. So the Rangers are to run off to this industrial center, and so we find out that really we are to just see Cyclobots making their way into this industrial center. Oh, one thing that I want to go on and state is I was to see some clips of Sentai footage, and I was like, man, for Sentai footage compared to the American version, man, you just see at some points the Power Rangers just beating up random folk. Like, man, do they just go on and just clock women and children and whatever, like, just like the villains. Like, I was like, man, this looks really exciting. Why can't the American version get this kind of brutalness to the show? Like, I was watching, like, some evil, I was watching, yeah, some, like, evil Power Rangers, and they were going on, and they were, like, beating up common folk, and they were, like, blasting away at people, and I was like, wow, like, Sentai version is way different than American. Why couldn't I have seen that for my Saturday morning cartoons? Man, that would have been sweet. Why don't we get that footage? But so anyways, we go on to again, it seems that they're really trying to sell this, the Voltex bazookas, because it seems that Wes is to have his bazooka, but no one else is. So Wes is to have his bazooka, and so Jen is to ask Wes, it's like, well, hey, can we count on you, Wes, this time around? Do you think that you can do your job? And Wes is like, yeah, I got it. And so we have like the Blue Ranger that goes on and tell Wes, it's like, well, I hope like you know what you're doing because we're counting on you. Sure, yeah, I think I got it. I think I know what my job is now. So we have the Rangers go into this industrial center to just be sent off to this pocket dimension. So when they arrive in this pocket dimension, it seems that we are to kind of do a different shade of color for this dimension. And we are all of a sudden to know from TurtleCon that there is to be a set of Rangers quite equal to the Time Force Rangers that have one goal and one goal alone, and that is to take out the Time Force Rangers that, of course, aren't evil. So we have the two teams duking it out. It's pretty awesome. So it seems that at first we have the evil version of the Rangers that are going on with the Chrono Sabers and kind of blasting the Rangers. And then we go on to have the Blue Ranger that blasts. Or we have the evil Blue Ranger that goes on to blast the Blue Ranger while he's kind of holding on to this mountain and he like falls off after the blast. We have the Red Ranger that fights the evil Red Ranger while they're both walking on water, it seems. Very unusual, but it is what it is. We have the evil Yellow Ranger toss the Yellow Ranger right into this mountain and it makes a big crash. We have the evil Green Ranger that is doing this weird kind of tornado spin attack and bashing Trip, who is the Green Ranger. So a lot of these attacks I was like, wow, this is so awesome. And probably these are kind of the normal common attacks for all these Rangers, but still, I thought that this episode was sweet. I was like, yeah, oh, this feels so good. The only thing that could go on and be better was if it was a bit of Power Rangers from another season. That would have been really cool. But to see, like, the doppelganger Time Force versus Time Force was just kind of really interesting to kind of play around with. So we go on to have the Time Force Rangers that are evil starting to use these time attacks that go on and slice through all of these characters. We start to see both the Pink and Red Ranger doing their clock attacks and blasting through most of the Rangers and really just taking them down. So we have the Rangers that decide that they're going to go on and get to the V weapons because Jen makes this call. So we have the Voltex bazookas that are to be whipped out, and it seems that the evil Time Force Rangers are to do the same. So we all of a sudden see both of these bazookas blasting away simultaneously, to then find out that the Rangers, both evil and good, have torn a hole within this pocket dimension. So we have the Rangers trying to desperately run to this hole to get out of this dimension, hopefully hoping that they won't face against these doppelganger evil Rangers. So we have them trying to run for this hole. Turtle Khan is hoping that he can go on and seal that hole up before they can leave. So we have us find out that only Wes and Jen got out of this hole, got out of this pocket dimension. And so Jen tries to communicate with the rest of the Rangers, but it seems that she cannot go on and get a hold of them because they, of course, are all stuck. The rest of the Rangers, besides Wes and Jen, are stuck in this pocket dimension. And I'm trying to figure out an easy way to not have to go on and state who the rest of the Rangers are, even though I would, of course, state it's Lucas, Trip, and Katie. My bad, for it seems that I am to only focus on both Wes and Jen. I have not often enough seen Time Force. Interestingly enough, though, the guy who plays Lucas, Michael Copon, I had recently just seen him in some like Christmas movie, oddly enough. And I was like, hey, that's the Time Force Ranger. But I didn't know what like name he was in the show. But I was like, hey, that's the Time Force Ranger. I knew him. And I was like, yeah. So it was interesting. So we have Turtle Khan with the evil Rangers, and so they're going to regroup and figure out how they're going to go on and get to the Rangers that are still in that pocket dimension. So we have both Wes and Jen that go to the clock tower to have Circuit say that the Rangers are trapped and have to have them break through the dimensional wall by having this blast being done by weapons. And it seems that both Jen and both Wes need to kind of figure out a way to trust themselves with one another to be able to blast in the perfect right place at the right time. And so that is to make both Wes and Jen feel very nervous. And so we go on to have, back at the pocket dimension, we have Turtle Khan tell the evil Rangers to get the remaining Rangers that are left, both Trip, Lucas, and Katie. So we come to find that Trip, Lucas, and Katie are to realize that they are still in the pocket dimension, and even though they don't exactly know where they are, so they find the evil Rangers and they realize that there's one thing and one thing that they can do only, and that is run away. So we have Jen that is to tell Wes the story of when she was to go on and first meet Alex. And she, of course, was to state that she was a rookie via the Time Force headquarters, and she was about to quit. Like, she was thinking that there was no way that she was eventually going to become a Power Ranger. So we are to all of a sudden have Alex meet up with Jen and kind of take her under his wing. And so they were going on at the Time Force headquarters in Millennium City in the future. And Alex was having Jen do, like, blaster practice and was trying to, like, help her out, like, get her aim correctly with the Chrono Blaster. So we end up going on to have Jen receive the Time Force badge while Alex was present for the ceremony. And so we have Jen, who is telling Wes all these moments and how she was to go on and really trust Alex, even though in the future Alex is probably dead or not existing because it's future, so he won't exist yet. So we have Wes, who is so tempted to just do a little bit of a shoulder touching, and then all of a sudden we have this be interrupted by Circuit, who is this state that Circuit was to be able to find the coordinates for them to be able to figure out a point that they can blast away to get to that pocket dimension, or to get the Rangers to come back, and so on and so forth. So we come to find this equipment that is to be the electro booster blasting thing. So it's just called Electro Booster for some goofy reason in the Arsenal thing. And so I was like, okay, whatever that means. So we go on to have the evil Rangers who are fighting against the Rangers remaining. And we have Jen, who is to make it into this this environment to try to persuade the Turtle Con to get her to the pocket dimension, of which he does. So Jen is to go on and have her weapon ready to blast this one location, as Wes is also to be waiting and trying to time out the perfect shot. So we all of a sudden come to find that the rest of the Rangers are very busy fighting off these doppelgangers, and we find that the pink evil doppelganger is to make her way to Jen and knock her weapon out of her hands. So Jen has to scramble to try and fight her evil self, and then grab this weapon just in time to blast and have the Rangers go back to their dimension, which perfectly they do. So we then go on to have Wes. Oh no, wait. So we then have the Rangers that are back in their normal dimension, and so is Turtle Con. So we then have Turtle Con, who grows massive. We then have, of course, the Rangers that are to call for the Zords through the time portal. And so now if we are to not only... Oh, I guess the other versions of the Time Force Rangers were actually to be called evil clones. My bad. I was to naturally assume that they were to just be called evil, because they were to be called evil clones. My bad if I didn't state that. So we come to find that we have the Time Force Megazord Mode Red for the Rangers to try to fight off the Turtle Con. And we all of a sudden have Turtle Con, who is to duplicate that Megazord. And so now, again, there is a mirror match going on, where the Megazord is trying to fight off this Megazord that has the same technique, that has the same tact. So, like, okay, how can we now win this match with this Megazord? Well, it seems that Wes's idea is to have the Time Force Megazord go into mode blue, which of course is a completely different setup. It's really interesting. It looks really cool. So while it seems that the Time Force mode blue Megazord is taking out the the mode red Megazord and trying to fight that off, we all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, have TurtleCon getting some attack from the Time Shadow Megazord. I don't know why. It seemed very random, but that is to go on and turn around and have the Time Force Megazord, that is the good Megazord, decide that it's going into the Shadow Force online to then have time targets, and then is to have a time blast, and that goes on to wipe out TurtleCon. So we then have the Rangers make it back to the clock tower. And so Wes is going on and kind of jokingly telling the Rangers that he thinks that they need to go on and work on their aim. So we all of a sudden are to have Wes with seemingly in the clock tower these this toy gun that shoots these darts or shoots these little toy rubber things that kind of suction cup onto things. We find a bunch of setups of cardboard monsters of the Rangers past, and so we then have Jen, who is trying to fire this toy gun to hit these objects, and she doesn't. So Wes goes on and tries to guide Jen into firing upon the right target, because of course Wes easily goes on and uses this and takes out certain cardboard figures. So we all of a sudden have Jen, who is to be reminded of Alex when she looks at Wes, and so that kind of wraps up this episode in a nice, neat little bow. So now, of course, we go on into the Power Rangers SPD episode. So, at the very beginning of this, we, of course, have the Delta base, as we probably would normally, at New Tech City. So, or I think, yeah, New Tech City? Anyways, so, in the beginning of this, we find Rick, a robotic interactive canine, who is having this ball to give to Sky, and Sky is too busy going on and hitting buttons on this computer. We have Jack that is to interrupt Sky and scare the crap out of him. So Sky is to be upset because now he has to go on and reset that whole bit of computer that he was going on and doing. And so maybe I'm kind of curious what Sky was looking up on that computer. Was there something not exactly PG for the kiddies on that computer? So Jack is going on and saying to Sky, it's like, wasn't your shift over like years ago or hours ago or a second ago? And Sky is like, well, like I like to go on and do this whole computer thing because it's soothing, or it comforts me. And Jack is like, well, okay, but so we of course have Jack, who is to grab the ball for Rick and is to chuck the ball, and when Rick brings it back, he immediately brings it back to Sky. And so Jack is like, well, wait a minute, like, why is it that when I am to throw the ball, Rick immediately just goes to you? And Sky's like, I don't know. So weirdly enough, that'll come into play in this episode. So we all of a sudden have an interruption, and so both Jack and Sky are to race off to immediately have to have all the Rangers come together and morph to go into their Zord bays to turn around and face a monster called Wutox that, of course, is in a giant robot. So, kind of curious when we were to, of course, besides like Mighty Morphin, when at certain points like Goldar would have a Zord, or we have like Serpentera or something like that going on, like I was kind of curious, like when did they ever just start that now all these monsters just have to have their own Zords? Why does that become a thing? I don't know why. I don't know how many times when I would go into like Beast Morphers where we'd have certain characters that like, oh yeah, I have my own Zord. Oh yeah, I have yeah, isn't that great? And I'm like, what happened to like make my monster grow? Like why isn't that a thing? I'm so baffled and confused why that isn't important anymore. That now we just have to have all of our monsters just have all these Zords popping out of nowhere. So, and who is making all these Zords for the monsters? I'm very curious. So, we have, of course, Kruger and Cat, who is filling us in on the Monster of the Week, who talks how, yeah, like, very dangerous guy. Yeah, we should be worried about him. Oh, yeah. It's the same normal run-of-the-mill stuff about any monster. So, we have the giant robot versus Delta Squad Megazord. And so, immediately when we have this battle, we all of a sudden have Wutox who's stating like, well, hey man, like, I got a lot of cities to destroy, so I'm just gonna go on mosey on over here and just try to run away. So we kind of find out that Wutox is trying to run away and try to get out of here, and the Rangers are all ticked because they're like, man, we should have grabbed him. Yeah, we should arrest him. Yeah, we should have judged him. So we all of a sudden have Kruger, who is to take his base and turn it into the Delta Command Megazord, which I'm like, great. I'm like, cool. Like, so the actual base turns into a Megazord, and like, I kind of always hoped that that would happen, but I had never remembered that there was a SPD episode where that happened. And so I was like, yeah, this whole base looked so interesting. But I was like, but how is that going to become a Zord at some point? So we have the Delta Command Megazord that is to go on and try to use its finger lasers to destroy this giant robot. And now we have Wutox, who is back to normal human size and is now back on the ground for the Rangers to go on and be able to take him out. So we of course have the Blue Ranger, who is to use his D-Rod, which is kind of this baton weapon. It seems for the Blue Ranger, we end up having him use that a lot in this episode. When he goes on to fight another character, he will have the D-Rod. So if I don't go on and state that immediately, like, just realize that that, of course, is what that is. So we have the Rangers that it seems that Wutog is to be easily taken care of. And so we have Jax that is to go on and slap the D-Whoppers, or the kind of the cuffs. So, or the D-Whappers. D-Whappers? Sounds better if you say D-Whoppers. So, we have Wutox being brought in to this this Delta base. So, Sky has to go on and drag him in here. And so by the time that Sky is to open up this cell, we have Wutox, who was to go on and ask Sky that I guess that this base becomes a Zord itself. And Sky's like, yeah. Like, come on, like, let's get in this cell. So we have all of a sudden who is to kind of just feel a little weak in the knees. We have Wu talks who's to drop and state that he can't breathe. And so Sky is like, I'm not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. If anybody has to ever gone on and seen the movie Beverly Hills Cop, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so we have Sky that is stating to Wu Talk, it's like, dude, I'm not falling for that. Like, eh. So we all of a sudden have Sky who is to try and grab Wu Talks, and we all of a sudden have them kind of wrestling, and we find that Wu Talks is to take his forehead and is to press it against Sky, and they end up body swapping. And so I'm going to go on, and whenever I'm to state that, like the whole body swapping thing, I'm not going to go on and just change who these characters are. If Sky is now Wu Talks, which he is, I'm just going to go on and state that it's Wu Talks. And for now, Wu Talks being Sky, I'm just going to state that this is now Sky for the whole body swapping idea. Like, so for the people who are to actually be the people, I'm not gonna just state that it's, you know, you can probably understand when I talk and when we get into the episode a little bit more. So we have Sky that destroys this translator that's on Wu Tog's neck. So Sky is to make sure that Wu Togs cannot go on and yell out for help for his friends, and so no one will understand him. So we have bizarrely Wu Talks, who is to kind of do this coin flip thing, and so now Sky is to be Wu Talks and to kind of take that in, and so we have Sky that is to flip this coin and is to wonder whether or not he's going to attack some random guard, and he doesn't. And so we have Sky that tells this guard, it's like, you are very lucky. So Sky looks really interesting in this kind of very disheveled form. And yeah, so we have Sky that states that he needs to find the Delta Base cockpit. And he's going to be stating that a lot through this episode because it's really hard to find, I guess. So Sky goes into Sid's room, which of course is to be the SPD Pink Ranger. And Sid is just kind of upset because Sky just barges into the room. And supposedly there's a whole manual rule that you have to go on and get permission to go into this room, because what if a woman could have been naked in there? For some goofy reason, it might have happened. So we have Sky that goes into Sid's room, and Sid, I think, is like singing in there, and we all of a sudden have Sid who's telling Sky, like, get out of this room. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna get out of here. So we had Sky thinking that this might have been the cockpit room, but it's not. So he keeps looking around. So Wu Talks wants to alert the Rangers, and so he continues to just bang on his cell, hoping that someone will come. And so Wu Talks gets zapped by this guard that has this kind of like this taser rod kind of thing. And so we, of course, have Wu Talks that is just very upset because no one can go on and be able to understand him no matter what he says. So we have Sid and Z that are talking about how Sky just went into their room. And so Z, all of a sudden, who is the Yellow Ranger, for those of you that don't know, because maybe don't follow SPD all that much, we have Z that quotes the manual and states, of course, what I had already just stated, that you have to have like permission to go into someone's room. And Sky is like, well, it was a mistake. And so they're like, well, hopefully it's a mistake that you don't repeat. And so Sky is like, oh, okay, I guess I'm getting my comeuppance. So we have Sky that comes up with this idea, or we have Wu Talks that is in his cell that is coming up with this idea to try and take his hand and hit this button on the cell to have the cell open. Man, like, if any other monster could have just come up with that idea, man, every monster would just be getting out of this prison just like that. So, we go on to have Kruger telling the Rangers about Wu Talks and how his information cannot be trusted. And so we go on to have Sky, who's like, well, hey, how about we judge him? How about we kind of get rid of him? And yeah, like, let's definitely get rid of this guy. And so we have the Rangers that are just like, okay, all right, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense for Sky stating that. The funny thing of it is we rarely in this episode aren't already, like, having the Rangers just state that, like, Sky is acting out of character, because Sky's character is to not be a person that, like, would be, like, much different from a bad guy to Sky. And so that's kind of sad. How no one can really legitimately tell the difference between Sky and a monster. It is what it is. So we come to find out that Wu Talks had escaped from his prison. Alerts are being sounded. So we have the Rangers that are running for Wu Talks while Sky is looking for the cockpit. Because he, of course, is going the opposite direction of wherever the Rangers are going. And Jack will eventually realize that. So we come to find Wu Talks is in a vent while the Rangers are right below him talking. So we have the Rangers that are realizing that it's like, okay, like, we can't find Wu Talks, and so it's like, well, hey guys, let's try to get Sky. Let's try to communicate with him. And they can't get to Sky, so, like, okay, no Wu Talks, no Sky, because Sky doesn't really give a crap. Sky's going on and trying to find that cockpit. So we have Wu Talks that finds Sky and starts to wrestle with him. Because, of course, Wu Talks is trying to get back the body of which that he is to have lost. So we all of a sudden have the rest of the Rangers coming in with their blasters to try to separate the two of them. So we have finally, when Wu Talks is to shove aside Sky, and Sky is to go on, and when Wu Talks runs, we of course again have Sky who's like, well, I'm going that way. And we finally have Jack who is to say, it's like, well, why is it that he's going the other way every time? So we have Sky that goes on to blast Rick, and then is to go on and grab Cat, who eventually becomes a Cat Ranger for SPD. I'm not talking about Catherine from, of course, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Different kind of cat we're talking about here. And so we at first have Cat, who's actually starting to beat up Sky. And I was like, all right, like, this is pretty cool. Like, you're, like, not having just Cat be this kind of just defenseless character. It's good that she's kind of getting her licks in, metaphorically speaking. So we have, of course, Sky, who, guess what questions he's asking for? He's asking where the cockpit is. And so Cat doesn't really want to give him that answer. So we, all of a sudden, after Cat is to have gotten beaten up, we have Kruger coming in. And so Kruger, funny enough, I think the guy who is to go on and do the voice of Kruger in the show is to also be Solaris Knight. Because when I was to go on and hear Solaris Knight like say certain things in that episode, I'm like, oh my god, yeah, I think that is the voice of the Kruger. Yes, that's because it is. Oh wow, I didn't know. I don't know, I haven't seen enough Mystic Force to connect that together. But so we have Kruger that comes in and is to be ticked off. And so we go on to have Kruger that's like, well, obviously you're not Sky, so who are you? And so we have Sky who's like, oh yeah, I'm Utox. Like, me and Sky body swapped. And so uh, we then go on to have Kruger who is to morph into the Shadow Ranger, the Shadow Knight Ranger, I think is what it was called. So we go on to have Kruger who is starting to fight Sky, but then Sky is to go on and play up the fact that he has been body swapped. And so it's like, well, hey, you can't go on and you can't destroy me, Kruger, because if you destroy me, then you will never get your Sky back into his Sky body. And so Kruger is to be very upset. So Kruger eventually is to fight with Sky and then is to fall a good distance. And so we have Wutox who is to realize that he won't get out of this. That there's no way for him to win now. That that really here, like, he can't go on and communicate with people, and that it seems that the Rangers are going to go on and like vaporize him or wipe him out. So we have Bridge also doing some realization that Wutox hasn't left this area. That more than likely, if he did, there would be sirens and stuff like that. There would be a way to figure out a way to track this monster. So they have the Rangers kind of make it back into this headquarters. So we come to find out that Sky is to finally figure out where the cockpit of this headquarters is. And so we have Wutox who is to realize that that Sky's plan was to get to this cockpit and was to take over to turn into this Zord. So, this Megazord. So, Wutox is to run to the Delta headquarters, or the Delta base. And so the Rangers are right there to try and stop Wutox. Wutox is to jump over the Rangers and is to fly in to these or to this headquarters. And so having the door sealed behind him to where the Rangers can't get into here. So we then have the Delta Command Megazord that gets assembled, and we go on to, it seems to have this Zord going on and doing this kind of deadly attack, and that is to kind of wipe out the city. And the Rangers are like, oh my god, there's nothing we can do. There's not a failsafe. There's nothing that we can go on and just figure out a way to just beat this thing. Because heaven forbid we have another Megazord that we could probably fight this Zord, but we're not going to do that now, are we? So we have we have Sky that is kind of relishing in the fact that he's like, yeah, like, we've won this day. And all of a sudden, Wutox is to come in and grab Sky and kind of get him out of this cockpit, stopping this attack from going on from the Delta Command Megazord. So we come to find both Sky and Wutox back where the Rangers are. And so we go on to have the Rangers rejoin with Sky. And again, they're thinking like, okay, we need to go on and we need to figure out a way to wipe out Wutox. But then all of a sudden, Kruger and Rick come in and they're like, wait a minute, like, stop what you're doing because we are to realize that both of these characters, both Sky and Wutox, aren't who they say they are, or who we think that they are. So we have Jack, who realizes the only way that we can solve this problem is by having to have Rick play fetch. So Jack throws the ball, and Jack goes for it, and when he returns, instead of going right to Sky, Rick goes to Wutox. It's like, aha, like, Rick can tell the difference, and so Wutox is Sky. So both Kruger and Jack grab Sky, and so Wutox is now go on and again put his forehead to Sky's head and body swap all over again. So we then have the Blue Ranger who had demorphed, who is to remorph, and so we go on to have the Power Rangers SPD Rangers use the K9 cannon and go on to blast away this monster into a containment card, so that way he can kind of be put off to jail. So the next thing we see is that Sky is playing fetch with the robot Rick and is consistently tossing this ball consistently, and Bridge is stating to Sky, it's like, well, wait a minute, like, why are you going on and playing with this dog? And Sky, of course, was stated, it's like, well, the reason why I'm going on and I'm doing this is because this dog had gone on to save my bacon, and so I feel like I owe it one. So I feel like I can go on and, like, every once in a while just kind of play with it. And so we have Bridge who's like, well, like, this is a robot dog and it has a pretty long life cycle, so like, you're even gonna die while this thing is still alive. So how many times are you gonna go on and really throw that ball? And so we of course have Sky who's like, well, one more time. So he tosses the ball and all of a sudden he hears a break. And so like, okay, we need to get the heck out of here. So on to the last Mystic Force episode. So really, I'm already realizing this is going to go over the hour, so I'm going to try to quickly go through this, but still details. So we have Nyla that in the beginning of this episode, beyond us getting to all of the previously on Power Ranger stuff, we have Nyla that is to go on and just utter one word, which is Udana, and then she's out. She says the word Udana, and then they go on to a next traditional scene. So I have to go on and state Nyla says Udana, and then we go into other things of the episode. And so it's like, what a waste is that? Like, one line is just Udana, and anyways, I don't get that at all. So we have Sculpin, who I'm assuming that's how to pronounce the name. It probably is to be like Sculpin or something, some goofy thing, but I'm going to call it Sculpin. So we have Sculpin, who seems to be kind of like a Aquaman kind of character, it seems, to me, in my brain. He has like almost like a trident thing going on. It's pretty sweet looking. Like the monster. It's pretty cool. I like the terrors. They're kind of really goofy and interesting. Anyways, so we have Sculpin, who is to state that they're going through the selection ceremony. to decide who of the terrors is going on to do the heavy lifting in this episode, while all the other terrors are just to go on and hang back. So the selection process, it seems, is to come up with the Hecatoid. And the Hecatoid is to be complaining because, like, man, like, I'm doing too much work and I want some food. And so we have the the Matumbo that goes on to say it's like, well, all you do is eat. Like, that's because you're, like, heavier than most of us. So we all of a sudden go on to have the Black Lance that is stating that the Hecatoid is out of shape. And we have Gekor that goes on and is asked, like, have they find Leanbow yet? And so we have Sculpin who's like, well, no, but, like, when we find him, like, we'll definitely have him become our master. So next up, we have the Rock Porium, which of course is this record store, which I thought that was a reasonably good idea. Like, there's other certain kind of stores and stuff like that that are awful, that are horrible. Like, some of the stuff that the Rangers have to do is their, like, side hustle beyond them being Rangers. A lot of times just doesn't work out that well. But it seems that, oddly enough, a record store just kind of works for me. It's like, it is better off than kind of having the Rangers do all this, like, charity work or random odd jobs that just are to be one episode or one-off things. So we all of a sudden have Xander that is talking to Toby, that it seems to become this health and fitness nut out of nowhere. So he is talking about that he is to, like, have his body become a temple or some goofy thing, and he is stating that he is to really get into diet and exercise. So Lily is deciding, like, well, hey guys, like, maybe we should go on and really do the same. And everybody's like, ugh. And so we of course have Nick that is stating that he doesn't know if he can really go on and trust Lily, considering they had figured out that Lily is connected to Necroli. And so we go on to transition to the Root Core, which of course is to be their, like, command center, if people aren't aware, because they might not know what Mystic Force really is whatsoever. So we have Gingy and we have Daggeron, and they are both going on and kind of like feeding something off screen, like they're tossing something. They're tossing some food to something that is off screen. And so we come to have them talking, and so neither one of them have heard from Udana or Claire about how their mission is going. And then all of a sudden we have Claire, who is on this kind of globe-like thing, this kind of circular-like thing, and is to call on to Daggeron and Genji, and is to state that Udana has been taken by Hexatoid. She goes on and states that it's just some, like, fat frog-looking thing. And so we go on and we, of course, have the Hecatoid. If he hadn't already gone on and taken Udana, now he's actually going on and putting her on a shelf somewhere so that way she can be displayed. And he calls her the Mother of Light has been caged. So we all of a sudden have Itasis, that is to be another terror, that is to go on and state to Hecatoid that he is to have gone on and made a mistake by collecting Udana, because the Rangers will come here to try and get her back. And Hecatoid is just like, well, no, I have a plan with that. I think everything's gonna go well. So we go on to have the Rangers go on and talk with Nick, and they ask Nick, it's like, well, like, do you think that you're kind of being a little bit hard on Lily? Kind of Madison starts this out, and then kind of Xander is to kind of sympathize, and we have Nick that it's like, I'm sorry, am I being too hard on her? She's freaking evil. Like, she's with Necroli. Like, how can you go on and how can you trust that? And so the guys are like, well, he makes a good point, but still. So we all of a sudden have Nick, who is to uh, have for his Mystic Morpher uh, both Denji and Daggeron tell him that there is a monster attacking the city and Udana has been captured. And Nick is like, well, of course. Like, of course, there's so much crap going on. So we have the Mystic Force Rangers who make their way to Morph and are to face off against the Hecatoid, or the Hecatoid. And we come to find out that this will be a Megazord battle. So we come to find out that the Hecatoid has to have put a bunch of tadpoles up in the sky to eventually hatch at some point. So we have the Solar Streak Megazord that comes into play here, and then we have the Rangers that quickly go into their Titan Megazord and try to fight off the Hecatoid. So we are to all of a sudden have the Hecatoid that goes on to bring the Rangers to his his dimension. And so we go on again and have Itasis that is to talk to the rest of the Terrors about that Udana is to be here, and that Hecatoid, it seems, is having much more of a plan than she originally thought. She's stating that to of course, Sculpin. And while they're talking, we of course have Lily, who's listening in, realizing that she's going to go on and try to do something good by possibly figuring out a way to rescue Udana. So we have Sculpin, who is to call for Necroli and is to tell her to try and find Leanbow. And so when Necroli walks off, we have Lily that is talking to Necroli, and it seems that Lily is to just kind of be in a fight with Necroli, to the point of Lily stating that she doesn't think she wants to be like Necroli. And so we have them kind of fight and then kind of separate here. So we have Hecatoid that is to unleash a plethora of Styoxoids to face off against the Mystic Forest Rangers. It is to tell them they need to hurry up and beat all of these monsters, or beat all these kind of minions before this time runs out, because they're on this kind of timed mission. So we come to find out that the Rangers are trying to do their dangest to try to take all these minions out. But then the Red Ranger tries to speed this up by getting to his kind of battle mode, or his battleizer, or his like special unique enhancement thing. So he goes into the Red Dragon Fire ranger, which I was like, okay, this looks pretty interesting. Like, it's kind of a big, massive looking thing, but it looks decent enough. So we go on to have the Red Ranger that kind of wipes all these characters out with using that mode. So now we're back with uh, Genji and the Solaris Knight that are realizing that they need to take out these tadpoles from the sky. And Genji is like, well, do you really think that we should really be focusing on that? Because shouldn't we be getting like Udana, or shouldn't we be helping out the Power Rangers? And so Solaris Knight is like, no, we need to focus on that, because if all these things hatch, like, it could really destroy the world. So we have Solaris Knight that gets into his Solar Streak Megazord, and so he tries to use this Furnace Blast to try and hopefully destroy these tadpoles that are kind of in the sky. So it comes to find when he uses this blast that it's not really working, it's not really effective. So we have at some point later on, we like go back to them and they're still using this Furnace Blast. And so it seems that this is kind of like, well, hey, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And so we of course have the Solaris Knight, who's like, well, hey, we're just gonna keep on doing this blast and hope that eventually it'll work, and eventually crack this thing and destroy. So we go on to have Necroli, who's to have this device, and so she quickly finds Leanbow. And so after the Rangers are to go on and wipe out the previous minions, we then have, of course, the Hecatoid that is to set up their next foes to face. And so the Rangers are to realize that these foes are to be themselves. And so they get their doppelgangers. And so we have the Mystic Force Rangers fighting clones or evil versions, whichever, however it is to really be set up here. So we weirdly enough find that the red, pink, and the green ranger all turn into dice. Oddly enough, I don't know why, but they're dice now. I don't know why it is, but they are that for some goofy reason. I don't even know why I'd had to kind of pull my thing a little bit further in front of me. So we find on the evil side of things that all of a sudden we have two rangers that are to go on and turn into this big, massive toad. And it seems that we only have two good rangers left. And so we have two evil rangers that turn into this giant toad. And they use this tongue attack to grab Madison. And so it seems that the other ranger is too focused on fighting these rangers that are left. So we have Madison that needs to figure out a way to break herself out of this problem of hers. So she calls for the Mystic Lion Staff. And we all of a sudden have both Madison and Chip, who both have these kind of suits of armor on now. And so we have, of course, Madison, who is to use this lion staff to destroy this frog, as well as also we have the Yellow Ranger that goes into crossbow staff, and he is to shoot out lightning bolts and is to take out all these other rangers. So we now, of course, have the rangers that are asking, like, so, well, hey, like, when are we going to get the rest of our rangers back to us? And Hecatoid is like, well, you got to come to where I'm at, and then you, of course, will get them. So we have Lily that is making her way through this location to all of a sudden bump into Phineas. And so we have Phineas who's to figure out that Lily, while he's talking to her, is to be Necrolide's daughter. And so we have Lily that is to state to Phineas that she is to want to go on and wants to save Udana. And so we have Phineas and we have Lily that are like, okay, like, well, it seemed like both of us are on the same goal here, so let's go on and save her. Because it seems that Lily cannot go on and have a friend to her name. And Phineas is like, well, because of the way I look and because of like who my parents are, like I don't have much friends either. So we then go back to Hecatoid. So we have all the Rangers being brought to now where the Terrors are to be located. And so that is to also bring Hecatoid to showcase to the Rangers that where exactly Udana is to be held. So we have Hecatoid that wants to take the Rangers and add them to his already collection. So we then transfer back with Lily, who's to meet up with Nyla. And so Nyla is to state how bad Lily is. And so, but Lily is to come up with a way to talk to Nyla and say just, well, hey, like, I'm going to help you, so shut up. So we come to find out that the Terras have found Leanbow, and when they go on and they break the seal that is holding Leanbow, we all of a sudden have Korag, or Korag, the Night Wolf, that is to go on and want to fight against these terrors. So we now are back with Hecatoid, and we have the Rangers who is to want to fight off Hecatoid by becoming the Manticore Megazord. And I was like, wow. This Megazord was so cool looking, and it has a really cool name also. So I was like, all right, like, really, I was so won over by this visually, and I was like, all right, like, again, I think it probably reminded me of the very last Power Rangers thing that I saw, where it was like a Megazord, and I was really won over by it because it looked like the Power Rangers like Zeo Zord. And so if you watch that last one, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, or if you don't, it's okay. So we have the Manticore Megazord that tries to scoop up Udana in its hand. And then we all of a sudden have Hecatoid that's like, no, 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 no. Like, I'm going to take this back. And so Hecatoid goes into this hole that is to lead the Rangers not being able to follow. So, really, of course, that goes on and that wraps up the episode. And that is to, of course, wrap up my review. Man, I honestly thought that I wasn't going to be able to make it through this because, of course, it's very late in the day for me, but somehow I managed to just luckily pull this off. So, with that said, I apologize if at any point I had trouble speaking or talking or whatever, because it's very late. It's very, very late. And plus, also, I was going to try to get to some show, but, you know, I don't know if that's going to be able to come out today. I thought it would, but every time I was to kind of check into it, I couldn't find it available anywhere. So I guess I'll have to kind of just wait to the following day to see if it finally is to be out for me to be able to finally get to it, because I really wanted to go on and get back into that show. But it seems if I can't go on and easily watch it, then we'll see. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, buddy. Bye, buddy.